Hi guys, Rob from Roll Balls. Let's take a quick look at clutch number 2 that I cut the other day and see how they're getting on, and we'll cover some old ground. Let me show you how I set up my baby snakes when they come out the egg. Okay, so here is the egg box 2 days after I've cut, and you can see that the majority of the snakes are now out. A couple are still not out of the egg, and we'll leave them in the egg. It's important to let them absorb as much of the yolk sac as they possibly can. The eggs look nicely hydrated, they're not dehydrated in there. You can see the snakes are alive. So the ones that are not out, we'll just leave them to come out on their own. We'll bob them back in the incubator when I've cleaned off the others, and let them come out by themselves. But there are some snakes that are already out, so what I'm going to do is just clean them off in a little tub of it's just plain warm water. Let's take one. He wants to go back in. 2. 3. 4. 5. So 5 of them are out, and you can see they're not trailing any umbilical. If we have a look underneath, they're nice and clean, so they have absorbed all the yolk. So we'll just put those to one side for a second and deal with these. We still have 4 that are in the egg, so let me remove the eggshells, the empty eggshells, and you'll see that they are completely empty. All the yolk has been totally absorbed, and there's nothing but a little bit of just goop in there. No yolk. All the eggs are the same. That's why we leave them to come out by themselves. So 4 still to come. Organise those, and you can see they're right there, the heads are right there poking out, so these will probably be out later today. I can already see that there's no issues with them, they're not kinked, they're quite active, strong, there's no umbilical twisting or anything like that in there, so we're just going to leave them. We'll stick them back in the incubator, let them come out in their own good time. So these ones go back in the incubator. The little bit of condensation on the top won't do them any harm. So the way that I set up my baby snakes, they're going to go into the rack. The ones that are still in the egg are back in the incubator, and we'll wait for those to come out. But I keep the whole clutch together in one tub, and the reason is that they need a little bit of different environmental conditions than the rest of the snakes, and until they shed their first time they're not going to eat. So it's easy to manage the husbandry, the special conditions that they need as baby snakes, by just keeping them all together. So I keep each of my clutches together until they shed, and then set them up individually. I do put them in the racks. My snake room is at 30 degrees, so it's not that much cooler than the incubator. You could also keep your baby snakes in the incubator until they shed. There's no problem doing that, but I do like to get them off the substrate, keep them nice and clean. And so what I'm doing, the setup is very, very simple. There's just a couple of paper towels in there. I'm just going to wet it down. There we go. It's quite wet, but there's no running water in there. I need it to be nice and moist, and I'll explain that in a moment. And I do like to give my baby snakes water. I don't know whether they drink or not until they shed, but there's no harm in putting water in, so I'll give them a shallow water dish. And that's it. All the baby snakes will go together in this tub in my hatchling rack. So that's how we deal with the baby snakes. And let's just get a close-up of one of these guys. They're still a little bit slimy from the egg, so let's get that all washed off. Let's just take a look at this guy here, and you'll notice that the skin is very, very shiny. This is a very waxy or oily protective skin that the baby snakes have had all the while that they've been in the egg, and this skin is the skin that protects them from being submerged in the albumen for 60 days. So this skin needs to be kept moist. If it dries up, it goes all crinkly and shiny, and the snakes have a very hard time in actually shedding. So we need to keep them moist. The skin needs to be kept moist just until the first shed, and then they get their adult skins, which is the same texture as a normal adult snake, and then they can be set up in the racks as normal as per any of your other snakes. But it's important to keep them moist. So that's the reason that we use damp paper towel. It's nice and clean, so if the snake does have, there's where the umbilical was attached, you can see that down here, and it is pretty clean, but sometimes it's a little bit raw, so we like to keep them as clean as possible, and it's very easy to change this paper towel as necessary every day if we need to. The snakes will not go to the bathroom. They might pee, but they don't poo because there's no food in there. They're still absorbing their internal yolk sacs, and they have absorbed the yolk, and they still have some reserves inside from that yolk sac, which is why we like to leave them in the egg as long as possible until they're ready to come out by themselves, because they'll need those reserves over the next week or so until they shed and start to eat. Okay guys, so that's very simple. Keep the snakes all together, keep them clean, very simple setup, but leave them in the egg as long as they want to be in the egg until they absorb all that yolk. So let's get a look at these guys and see if we can start identifying. Let me just pull farther out. For those of you that have never had to identify baby snakes before, always start with the parents to figure out what's possible. So the mum for this clutch was a normal, so she's not adding any genes, but you can see here that none of these snakes are normals, and the reason for that is this is Dad. Dad is a Super Pastel Leopard Mojave, and you can see the extended alien heads caused by the leopard. You can see the dorsal striping, and some of the alien heads are floating because of the Mojave, and he is a Super Pastel, very blushed and washed out, and being a super form it means that all his babies will be at least pastel. He's going to pass on the pastel gene because he's a super, so we can get pastels, we can get pastel leopards, we can get pastel Mojaves, and we can get pastel leopard Mojaves. So only a limited number of combinations, and the genes are very, very distinctive in this guy. So let's put him back. This guy here is a leopard, just a straight leopard. He's het for clown male, but a straight leopard. You can see the very distinctive head stamp, but he's a very dark snake, and you can see the distinctive leopard pattern here. Not a very prominent dorsal stripe, and the leopard extends out the alien heads here. So in the babies we're looking for leopard, a slightly strange pattern from leopard. We also have a Mojave from the first clutch, and you'll see the Mojave again is a dark snake, not as dark as the leopard, and not a very distinctive head stamp, just a very dark coloured head stamp, unlike the leopard, which does have some pattern on the head stamp. And the giveaway for Mojave are the floating alien heads, these keyhole alien heads which are floating down the side. And also Mojave does have a stronger dorsal stripe. So let's have a first crack at identifying some of these babies, comparing and contrasting with both the dad and some examples from other snakes with the same genes that I have in my collection. So because Dad is a Super Pastel, we expect all these to be pastel, and you can see immediately from all of the head stamps, you can see the blushing on the head, which is typical of pastel, and also the slightly brighter colour that pastel gives. The white lips on the babies here, so every single one of these babies, again you see the head stamp pastel, pastel, so he is a super for sure. Now these are all pastels, so let's see if we can start to identify what we've got. This little guy here is just a pastel. He's got none of the leopard characteristics. He doesn't have the extended horizontal alien heads, he doesn't have the floating alien heads. He's got a typical ball python pattern, but he's quite bright. So this is pastel. This is just pastel on its own, and the rest by contrast you can see are all extremely dark coloured. So these all have leopard in them, and you'll see they all have the strange leopard pattern. So this one here, see the pattern there. So I think this one is just leopard, pastel leopard. For that one. The others, you'll see at the tail end, have some striping, but these are clearly leopard because they are dark. But you can see on this guy here, he doesn't want to keep still. You can see on this guy here that we do have floating alien heads with the stripe down the tail as well. So I believe that all three of these are exactly the same snake. So again, you can see the leopard in this guy. This is the leopard extending out the alien heads, but you can see that we also get the floating alien heads, the dots on there, and a stripe on the tail. And yet another one. So let's get these into the tub, set up. These are the ones that are out. So here they are in the tub, and it's very normal that they'll all bunch up together in a ball in one corner. That's what hatchlings do for protection. And these are normal sized babies. There are no issues with them. They're not underdeveloped. There's no defects. They're all looking perfectly healthy. They do have enough reserves not to eat. So we'll wait until they shed out, and that should take around 7 to 10 days for them all to shed out. So they'll all stay together in this hatchling tub with the water until they shed, and then I'll show you how we get these guys eating. You'll notice that some of the eggs still have some of the newspaper stuck to them from when they were laid, and typically I like to get as much as that newspaper off the eggs as possible, but you can see it hasn't affected the eggs in any way. They've sat there in the incubator on those plastic mats above the substrate with the newspaper stuck to them, and it's been perfectly fine. Hasn't affected the snakes in any way, so don't fret about it too much. Clean off the eggs as much as possible, but the eggs are living things. They have their own immune system, and that's what keeps the eggs bacteria and mold free. So the snakes themselves have life all figured out. Don't sweat it too much. These eggs are living things. They have their own immune system, and a little bit of newspaper attached to the eggs not going to do them any harm at all. Okay, the other 4 babies are out of the egg, so same drill. We'll wash them off and set them up in the hatchling rack. Let's take a look at what we've got here. So here we go. And again, everything obviously pastel. And now I'm a little confused because I don't see Mojave in any of these. and having re-looked at the babies from yesterday, I don't see Mojave in those either. All of those leopards look just like leopards. All of these pastels look just like pastel. This is a Pastel Mojave from a previous clutch, and this is more like what I was expecting to see in Mojave babies. So looking at these, I don't really see any that match that. I would say these are all just straight pastels. Let's have a look at them one by one as we set them up, and you guys can jump in and tell me whether you see Mojave in any of these. I don't. And I'm also now not certain about the Mojave and the leopards from yesterday, but we'll wait for them to shed. So here's the first one. That's pastel. No Mojave. Now this one does have a little bit of a dorsal stripe. This one I'd say just pastel. And this one also just pastel. Again, we've got a couple of alien heads that are floating down here, and there is some dorsal striping, but to be honest I'm not seeing Mojave in these. Here's the whole clutch again, and here are the leopards that we got. So we got 4 leopards and 5 pastels. And this is the one that I thought was Leopard Mojave. Is that actually Leopard Mojave? And this one also. Some floating alien heads, but I'm used to seeing Mojave with more of a dorsal stripe than I'm seeing in these guys. But now I'm totally confused, so we're going to wait for them to shed and see if we can identify them any better after they've shed. So there we go guys, I find myself struggling once again to identify even simple gene combos. Here is Dad, the Super Pastel Leopard Mojave, and there is no doubt at all that this guy is Mojave. He has the classic dorsal striping, he has floating alien heads. No doubt at all that this guy is Mojave. I just can't see it in any of his offspring. We have pastel leopards and we have pastels, and clearly none of the pastels are Mojave. The leopards has me a little bit confused, but again the pattern is quite distinct on the dad, so I'm not seeing Mojave in any of the offspring, which would be extremely unusual. So we wait for the babies to shed. I do have another shot with that male. He's also been bred this year to my spinner female, so we'll see whether she actually manages to produce any Mojave combos from this male. If you see Mojave in any of the combos there, we will wait for them to shed and take another look a little bit later. I don't think that any of the pastels are Mojave, but we'll take another look at the leopards once they've shed out and see if we can convince ourselves. But to be honest, I just don't see Mojave in any of those babies. Before I sign off, big shout out to Richard at Predator BP, the new t-shirt and the new logo with the 4 horsemen on the back there. Thanks mate, awesome. So don't forget to share, like and subscribe. Share my confusion, that is, and we'll see you next time.